Hey guys, J-Funk here, and today I want to do a retrospect of BFA Season 3 in Mythic Plus. Additionally, I want to show you what the best comps were, kind of why I think those comps are really strong this season, and then some of my predictions of what I think will be to look out for in Season 4. First of all, I'm going to show this is the Season 2 of BFA DPS stats. I want to kind of go over the stats for Season 2 and kind of see the transition to Season 3 and who were the big winners this season. So first of all, you have fire mages have 0.2% representation with 54 fire mage players. Additionally, you have shadow priests at only 4.3%, and with outlaw at a whopping 23.7% in season 2. But as you'll see, as we transition to season 3, outlaw loses a lot of representation because a lot of groups started running one outlaw rogue instead of two, which dramatically decreased their representation. This is a result of the nerfs that they received early on into season 3 of BFA to their AoE DPS, but their utility is still really good and you still want to have one of those in your group. Additionally, we see fire mages got a huge increase in representation. They went from about 0.2% to 7.4%. Fire Mage became a very popular DPS class this season because of its ability to burst down targets incredibly hard. It has one of the best AoE DPS in the game for burst cooldowns, and a lot of groups started pulling around Combustion in order to maximize their Fire Mage's damage. Additionally, you see an increase in Shadow Priest representation this season, because Shadow Priest was an incredibly strong scaling spec this season and does a lot of good damage. It was a very good spec, maybe still a little bit underrepresented comparatively. We also see a big increase in Fury Warriors because Brewmaster was the primary tank that was being played this expansion. You're going to see much more Fury Warriors because having one warrior in your group is still very good for the battle shout and the AoE slow. So you saw Fury Warriors being played. Also, their damage profile was a little bit better this season because you were pulling smaller because of Beguiling, which benefits Fury Warrior for their 5 target cap. And now we're going to look at the best compositions for this season. So we're going to start out here with Brewmaster, Resto Druid, Fire Mage, Outlaw, and Havoc. Now Fire Mage, once again, is this like the biggest winner of this patch, with Outlaw and Havoc remaining really consistent through every season, but Outlaw and Havoc are pretty much in every group, and it seems like for this third DPS slot, you can pretty much slot any DPS into this third slot with Outlaw and Havoc, and it would succeed. But the most popular ones were Fire Mage, BM Hunter, Fury Warrior, Balanced Druid, Shadow Priest this season, for many different reasons. I think Fire Mage was the most popular of all these choices. You didn't really see that many Beast Mastery Hunters, at least I haven't. Fury Warrior, you saw quite a bit as well. Shadow Priest. Then for tanks, Brewmaster was the most powerful tank and most popular tank this patch. With Prot Warrior right at their heels. I think Prot Warrior was a little bit undervalued this patch. I think that Prot Warrior was about as strong or maybe even stronger than Brewmaster in a variety of situations, in particular like Tyrannical Waycrest, when Spell Reflect damage is a big deal. They did nerf Spell Reflect damage quite a bit going into Season 3 to kind of compensate for this, but it's still very strong and powerful. Just the amount of damage that Prot Warrior can provide to your group, even after their significant nerfs going into this patch, is still very useful. I think Brewmaster was played quite a bit just because it dealt really well with Beguiling compared to other tanks. It could soak the Tides damage without really a care in the world. With a decrease to Windwalker representation because Windwalker's damage. Windwalker is not the best scaling spec in the world. Windwalker kind of, as the progression goes along, scales worse than other classes, which means it does less damage. And this season it didn't do very much damage in comparison to Fire Mage. So you're going to see less of that and see it increase the Brewmasters. Next up, I want to talk about some things that you should be looking that I predict might be good and important in the next season. So first off, it'd be Mistweavers and Windwalkers. I'm interested to see how important Monk utility is to a group with Beguiling going away, um, as well as buffs to both of these specs. Mistweaver got a large amount of buffs, and Windwalker received a small buff as well. On top of that is the nerf to Brewmaster Monks. They got nerfed quite a bit in Mythic Plus situations. All these will combine to see which Monk spec will end up being the most popular in Mythic Plus this season. The class representation of Mistweaver and Windwalker are usually pretty low. I'm interested to see if any healer players will transition to playing Mistweaver full time and incorporating into that group. I'm sure because of the buffs, we'll at least initially see a lot of Mistweaver players trying it out to see how well it fits into the group. But it is competing against Resto Druid and more notably Holy Paladin, which Holy Paladin seems like a unstoppable force of damage right now. So Holy Paladin might be might just overwhelm Mistweavers. Also, Windwalkers, important to me. Windwalker monks did receive a slight single target buff, which is nice. But Windwalker monk does not scale as well as other specs. They're unfortunately one of the few classes in the game that still doesn't want to stack haste as its stat. Haste is a very bad stat for them, and unfortunately, because of the new corruption system, there are a lot of the more powerful corruption effects benefit from haste. They have hasted RPPMs, which means the more haste you have, the more procs that you're going to do. And it does seem like these corruption effects are going to make up a large portion of your damage, at least currently when I'm recording this video, with Infinite Stars and Echoing Void. So as a result, Windwalker might fall to the wayside just because it's not going to be gaining as much damage from those effects. But the Monk utility kit is still very powerful. Hopefully Windwalker doesn't fall too far behind in damage, and if it doesn't, we might see it played quite a bit in keys. It does synergize well with Warrior and Rogue. I'm not sure how well it does with Holy Paladin, but it could be played quite a bit. Next up would be Death Knights, in particular DPS Death Knights. I think Unholy is the more popular of the two right now, and I think that's for a pretty good reason. Unholy's AoE deeps is unmatched in terms of potential. In bigger pulls, which you might see much more bigger pulls this patch because of the removal of Beguiling, it isn't limiting you on what you can pull. You're not like having to deal with tides or voids or enchanteds while you're pulling stuff. This could lead to Unholy becoming more popular because AoE damage does so much. I think Unholy was maybe a little bit underrepresented this patch, as well as Frost DK. Frost DK isn't played very much at all in comparison to Unholy in Mythic Plus, but I do think Frost DK has its niches that it excels at over Unholy at times. It could be nice, for example, like dungeons where you can control undead, like a Talvadazar or King's Rest. It could be quite good. I am intrigued to see how Death Knights perform and how popular they will be this season. Me personally, I'm going to try out a Death Knight alt to see how well it goes. Yeah, but I just think that the class should be played more. We might see it more this season. I guess we'll see. Next up, we have Vulpera. Now, Vulpera are a new race in 8.3, and they have a racial that's very important. They have the Make Camp racial, which I'll demonstrate here in a moment. But what the Make Camp racial does is it allows you to place a camp outside of a dungeon entrance, and then you can use your other racial to teleport to that camp. And how this works in dungeons is you can place a camp outside of a dungeon entrance, a dungeon that has like a boss checkpoint, say like Toldegor, Shrine of the Storm, Waycrest, that kind of thing. And then say you kill a boss that has a checkpoint, Vulpera can teleport out of the dungeon to their camp, which is right outside the dungeon, and then they can use a tome and then swap all their essences and talents and gear for more of a single target setup for the next boss. This is really strong in like pure DPS specs or classes that have multiple specs that excel at different things, such as Mage that can switch from Fire to say Arcane for a pure single target fight to do a lot more damage, or for DK or Unholy, who can swap from their AoE spec to a single target spec and just decimate single target. I think Vulpera may be a little bit underrated going into this patch. They might end up being a pretty important thing. The one downside here is though is that you're gonna be, if you have a Vulpera player, then you don't have a Blood Elf. which means that you're losing an Arcane Torrent, which for some dungeons such as King's Rest, maybe Underrot, that could be a very important thing. But I do think that it potentially is very worth it to have at least the classes that benefit the most from being able to switch their essences and all that to being Vulpera. I guess we'll see how this ends up. I do think that it has potential, but I do want to demonstrate for you real quick how the make camp ratio works. So this is how the make camp ratio works. You make a camp at 10-minute cooldown outside of the dungeon. When you have a camp here, you can place it. It acts as a rested zone. And then you enter a dungeon very quickly. And then after you've entered the dungeon, you can use your return to camp ratio, which will teleport you outside of the dungeon where you placed your camp. This allows you to swap your essences very quickly. This cast is very long, it has 10-second cooldown, and there are people that do a similar strategy to this without using the racial. You see you have this cutscene here that you can cancel, and then you can go to your camp, and it's a rested area, you swap all your talents and everything, and you're good to go. There are people that will do strategies that are similar to the make camp thing already. What they'll do is they'll leave the group towards the end of a boss fight of a checkpoint, and then they'll kill the boss and then get teleported out of the dungeon because they left the group and then swap their stuff. But the Vulpera ratio allows you to do this more consistently and at more locations. There's less risk involved with Vulpera changing their racials and everything. So I think Vulpera potentially very good. Next up would be the Shadow Meld PvP trinket. So there is a new trinket in patch 8.3 that is a PvP trinket. It's a new PvP trinket they introduced called the Corrupted Gladiator's Breach. What this trinket does is it allows you to open a gateway that allows people to slip into the void for 6 seconds, and your speed is increased. Now, we don't know how this trinket works exactly yet, but this could mean that players, any players in your group could be using this trinket. They could make a gateway, and then all the players in your group could enter the gateway, and then you could skip right to a location, and you cannot be seen by players, so I would assume this also means that you cannot be seen by NPCs. You're just phased out, similar to the Obelisk effect in the next affix, which could potentially mean that you could shadow meld mobs off, which would give Horde a way to access shadow meld on a trinket, which could be very strong. Additionally, you can use this in combat, so you could just skip mobs and stuff. So this has potential to be very good. I'm interested to see how it works, interacts, and how mandatory it becomes in hierarchies, if it does at all. But yeah, that brings us to the end of the video. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please like it. Make sure to comment, subscribe if you like this video as well. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a great day.